Hi, I'm Paulette Stout. I'm a local author from Acton, Massachusetts, and really happy to be here at the Jacob Edwards Library to talk to you a little bit about books and writing and my journey and do a little reading and introduce you to some of my stories. So who am I? I was raised by a single dad in New York City, and I've been in Acton for 17 years. I am married. I have 2 adult children, and I own my own marketing company, and I wear a lot of grammar shirts. So today I am wearing my semicolon. So I used to lead a writing team, and I asked my group, what's your favorite piece of punctuation? You know, like a nice geeky writer thing to do. And everyone said, without fail, M dash. Everyone loved M dashes. So I got my whole team t-shirts with M dashes on them. And then I had one person come over to me and she says, you know, I felt a lot of pressure, you know, to kind of go along with everyone else, but I really like semicolons better. So ever since I heard that story, I was like, okay, I'm gonna embrace the semicolon. So that's my little thing, so I got a semicolon. So I write women's fiction, and some people get a little confused about what women's fiction is. And it's a story about a character that's going on a transformational journey. Like they start one way, and then by the end of the book, they are someone newer and better and fresher than they were at the beginning. It's a really flexible, great genre to write in because it can be contemporary, it can be historical, it can be magical, paranormal. Cozy women's fiction is very popular right now. You have like witches and mermaids and that kind of stuff. So it gives you a lot of creative freedom to write what you want. Some genres have a lot of conventions. Mystery, you've got a clue, there's a murderer. A lot of some other genres, romance, there's kind of have meet cute, something happens, happily ever after. So there's a lot of genre constraints. So women's fiction is a really great genre. So for women's fiction, I write stories that are fast-paced, they have rich characters, they're all set in New York City. But what I like to do is to tell the human side of social issues. Things that you read about or you hear about in the news and they're interesting, and you've like, why don't we talk about them? There's all these issues that you just, why don't we talk about these things more? And I think that by exploring those in fiction, we really have an opportunity to step into the lives of someone who's different than ourselves. We're all polarized really right now, but I think there's a lot of lack of understanding, and I think that through story, you can really get to a place where you can kind of experience that person's journey and how they're navigating the experience, and maybe feel like, I hadn't thought about that before. And I think it's a great place for taboo conversations. That's my thing, and we'll get to that when I talk about my stories. But it's just like there's things that we're not supposed to talk about, but we should. And I feel like that's where great conversations start. But, it helps us gain perspective about things that we might not have thought of before. What is it like? Is it what we thought? You just never thought about it before. I had one person who read my second book and was just kind of like, I read about it because she didn't think it was true, and she ran out and she looked it up and it's true, and she learned something, and it challenged her worldview, so it made her feel a little uncomfortable, but in the end she really enjoyed the story and gained something out of the experience. So that's what I'm trying to do. I really try to do a lot of research because of the accuracy matters in story. People who read historical fiction, you don't want it to misrepresent the situation, and that's the same thing in my story. So I draw on my own life experiences, but I also do a lot of internet research. I read books, I do interviews, I go to locations, in person, just to kind of see what it's like. What does it smell like? Are there birds? Is there street noise? Is there construction? All those types of things help make for a more immersive experience when you're reading the story. I also interview experts, and I collaborate with what are known as sensitivity readers. So there's a lot of talk these days about what authors should write, what they shouldn't write. If you're not from that background, should you be writing that story? Are you the one to write that story? So what I do, because I find that sometimes people look at this almost a little backwards. Working with people in communities, they're going to be wagging your fingers at you, telling you what not to do. But what I've found is that they share opportunities you never would have known because you don't know what you don't know. So for instance, in my second book, I had a character who's going through, recovery from kind of some unwanted, sexual experiences, and he's going to a therapist. So in my head, I'm writing my books, and I have like the stereotypical Sigmund Freud type of therapist dude. Like that's kind of like the first draft. So I get it off. So I send it to my expert. She's a licensed therapist, and she said, the people going into that field of, clinical work are young. They're working more peer-to-peer in that particular line of social work. So I dropped 30 years, I made the character much younger, and that's just like makes the story more authentic, and that's not something that I would have known if I hadn't reached out to the expert at the time. So another example is in my current book, which is coming out in February. I'm super excited about it. You guys can't see, we'll talk about it in a little bit. But my main character is a black professional woman. And look, when I grew up in New York City, I was surrounded by professional people of all races and classes and everything. And then when I'm looking at stories, I'm just not seeing that diversity of character. I found that a lot of the black characters in the stories I read are either they're kind of on the brink of financial ruin, or they're living in very inner city communities exclusively, So I wanted to show the other side, what I've experienced, like the people in my life. And I had a side character that's in my first two books, Barbara, and she's going to be the protagonist in this new story. But I am not a black person. So I worked with black women, I interviewed them, I had them read chapters as we went along, I did research, I did social listening, I read books, and I listened in social spaces, just hearing the conversations that people were having online, the good things, the bad things, and I just felt like that enabled me to add a lot of richness and texture. And I also wanted to be sure that I didn't do anything offensive in the story. So it was a really great experience. I feel like I got such a greater insight into the experiences of black women in the workplace by writing this book, and I love when I write stories, then I feel like I grow, so much more, and I hope my readers do too. Here's a QR code if you want to pop onto my website and look and see. There's free stories and all kinds of stuff going on there if you're interested. So I've got 3 novels written and an anthology that I helped organize. Love Only Better came out in 21. It was my debut. What We Never Say is in the same universe. They're all 3 are in the same universe. And What I Can't See is coming out February 2024. A Million Ways came out this spring. It is an anthology focused on the theme of motherhood, and that is short stories from 12 authors. So in this book, I grew up, I had a single dad who was super pushy. Like if we went out to eat, like he would sometimes go into the kitchen because he didn't want to wait for the server to come back. I mean, that's the kind of person that raised me, so if I'm a little loud, that's where it came from. But the one thing he didn't do was kind of have that conversation with me about the birds and the bees. Like we never had the conversation. So when I entered adulthood, I didn't know what the hell was going on in the bedroom, and I just was a little bit clueless. So I kept looking for information. Everything was either super clinical and medical, or just so dry and kinky, so kinky you just wanted to look through your fingers and no. So I just was looking for kind of a middle of the road general conversation of a journey of a woman having the same kind of troubles that I was having in my own life. Love Only Better has a single point of view. It is Rebecca's story. It's set in New York City, and it's a really empowering story. And yes, it's got open door intimacy and a juicy little romance in there too, but it's really about a woman finding the ability to love herself, in all aspects of her life, in her professional life, with her family, finding her voice. So it's a very empowering story. So it's won 5 awards to date. I'm really proud of it, and it kind of started off this series of bold journeys that continues with What We Never Say. So What We Never Say still has the same group of characters. It focuses on Kyle's story primarily, and that Kyle is the male love interest from the first one, affectionately known as everyone's favorite book boyfriend. I have a prequel that's free on my website you can get, because Kyle didn't have a point of view. And sometimes when you read a book and you don't you're not able to get into the head of the character. Like, oh, I wanted to know what that character was thinking. So I felt like, Kyle needed a voice, so I wrote this prequel that was a little bit, it starts from before Love Only Better starts. So this kind of takes it forward, and I had this idea for Kyle, to have him work in the fashion, having been like in the fashion industry. He's a photographer, he's a food photographer in the first book, which was super fun to research also. But it kind of came out of like two different ideas. At the tail end of the Me Too movement, like male survivors started coming forward. And I just noticed they weren't getting the same kind of nurturing embrace that the women survivors were. So it's just one of those things, I just noticed it, just kind of filed it away. And then there's that other notion of like, believe all women. And by far, women are overwhelmingly the majority of survivors of abuse, but there are male survivors too. And when the Believe All Women started, there was a piece of me as kind of like a modern liberated woman that felt a little almost insulted and infantilized. Like, can't I have agency to make my own mistakes? Like, can I do good things and bad things? So What We Never Say kind of came out of the union of those two ideas. It is like, you have a kind of a sympathetic male survivor and a powerful woman who is the abuser, and like what happens when that all happens. So it has 3 point of views. It has Kyle, Rebecca, and then the bad guy who is Jane, and she is a magazine publisher of like a Vogue type magazine, very much like an Anna Wintour type of character, and it's high fashion publishing. And she took advantage of Kyle, off the page and 10 years ago. Like, what happens when she comes back into the life and all that kind of stuff. So it's a super juicy read, y'all. It's really good. It's on audio too, so if that's your job, you can kind of get that too. But it was a great exploration, and that it did challenge people's notion of sympathies and gender roles and all that kind of thing. So it was just a really fun book to write. And in writing those 2 books, I had this side character. Her name was Barbara Washington. She was this fabulous black lawyer that would never be found without her like Christian Louboutin like high heel shoes with the red bottoms. She was just an affluent character. When I was growing up, my best friend was from a very wealthy family, a black family, and she was like the richest person I knew. So it made sense in this little friend group to have the most affluent person be from a black family. That's not something we see a lot in the books I read. So this one tackles the issue of race and class, and you've got this really capable woman who's been trying to do the right thing. She has a very high achieving family, comes from lawyers. They've all, multi-generational wealth type of a situation, and she's sacrificed and she's worked and she's studied, but she still hits that black ceiling. She can't progress further in her corporate job, not as easily as potentially a male could, or a white male could, or a white woman. So she hits this ceiling, and I thought it would be interesting to kind of juxtapose race and class from my own background of being raised by a single parent in New York City and having some struggles financially growing up. I have the male love interest from a gang-involved background in a not great neighborhood, system-involved, juvenile hall, that kind of vibe, but changes his life, and they end up at the same place. They end up competing for the same job. So what happens when they have a love connection and then someone's her boss? The guy is her boss. So I thought that was kind of a interesting thing to explore. So it tackles race, it tackles class, but it's got this, really fabulous relationship with these 2 characters, which was very interesting for me to write because my first book took me 17 years to write, Love Only Better. It's like one of those things where you write it and you rewrite it and then you give it to people and you rewrite it, and it's one of those things. And then What We Never Say, was a little over a year. So I was writing Kyle and Rebecca for the better part of 20 years, and now I have to write Rebecca and Sebastian. And they are different people. They are bolder, they are more extroverted. We were just having a conversation about extrovert, so they are extroverted and they do everything extroverted. They communicate more confidently, they make love more confidently. Look, everything was different for them. So sometimes I would get to a spot when I was writing and I'd be like, oh, no, that's Kyle would say that, Sebastian wouldn't say that, or Rebecca would say that, not Barbara, and I have to kind of make sure that I'm being mindful of the characterization of what's going on with the new characters. And then when I got into the bedroom, it was the same damn thing, so these people are a little more wild, so a little spicier, folks. So love this one. It will be out in print, audio, and ebook on February 6th. My other story that I'm super proud of was A Million Ways. It was a 12-author anthology that I helped organize, and it's on the theme of motherhood. I sat down and wrote, and I came up with a story that was exploring the struggle that working women face of like having to balance their career and their family. And what happens if you want to put your career first? What happens if that's where you feel like your heart lies? What are the consequences of that? So this story explores, she's in her early 70s. She's a former photojournalist, war photographer, who was over in Vietnam and got pregnant. And she was a super feminist, got pregnant. And she had the child, raised it on her own, but then became estranged from her daughter. And what happens with that whole mix-up of things? So it's a great story, folks. I really enjoy this. But the anthology is really interesting because it spans, the whole spectrum of motherhood. It starts from, young children to older in life. There's World War II stories. There's period pieces in here. There's modern stories. There's funny stories. There's just more serious stories. So it's a really great exploration about the breadth and depth of motherhood. So I definitely encourage you to check that one out. So I'm going to read you a selection from the book that is coming up. It is What Eyes Can't See. And I'm just going to read you from the opening of the story. So this book has two POVs, and we're beginning with the point of view of the main character, Barbara. Waves lap the hem of my nightgown, the wet sand seeping through from hours of sitting. The fabric floated in a moment of blissful weightlessness before the undertow sucked the magic away, just like my life. It's my wedding day, only I wasn't the bride. Not anymore. Joe, my ex-groom, was off bedding someone new. No doubt the owner of the red thong. I found it moments before I saw her wearing my fiancé in the bed we'd shared together for 3 years. My fairy tale world shattered by dental floss masquerading as underwear. Another wave rolled in, this one chillier. No two were alike. Some caressed like bath water, sharing gifts from the ocean floor. Others were icy as the dark depths reluctantly crashed to the surface. A reminder that the cold truth is always there, lurking. Same as my discovery about Joe. The signs were there, despite my willful blinders. Joe's wandering eye in social situations, his whistling after evening business dinners, his lack of disappointment when I had to work late. Both our jobs were demanding. I was on track to make general counsel at my company at age 31, an accomplishment for anyone, let alone the only black woman on the legal team. My mistake was thinking Joe understood and supported me. He knew the sacrifices success demanded, or so I thought. A whopping misstep in a life founded on precision. Not that I had much choice. My dad, a famed lawyer, himself expected perfection, as did the rest of our high-achieving family. Failure was unthinkable in the Washington household. Its rare occurrence received blank stares like you were speaking a foreign language, and was easily dismissed as an outlier. Our norm was excellence. Perfect grades from kindergarten through college, passing the bar exam on the first try, getting the dream job, meeting the ideal guy, a smart, accomplished, driven black man even my dad liked. Instead of buying him off, as he'd attempted with my past boyfriends he didn't like, they became fast friends. Dad took my breakup with Joe almost harder than I did. Until now, until today. I rubbed my arms, building up friction to warm myself. But the chill penetrated my bones so deep I feared it'd stay forever. I inched backward, the sand sticking to my pruned fingers as the morning sun peeked over the horizon. It was a beautiful day. My wedding pictures would have been glorious. The reality hit me like a 2-ton weight. My miscalculation of scheduling a non-refundable destination wedding backfired in epic fashion. I had a ceremony with no groom, but I refused to invest any more time, equity, and love in a man unwilling to return those gifts. Our breakup was inevitable. My accelerated timeline turned into a merciful parting gift to myself. Meanwhile, giving the event reservation to my best friend Rebecca made perfect sense. It saved me from shopping for a present. Not that I mind shopping, as long as there's a concierge involved. But it meant my painstaking preparations would go to someone I loved. The no-frills courthouse ceremony Rebecca had planned at Manhattan City Hall wasn't hard to top. Her finances were always tight. The plan was logical to a fault. Too bad my damaged psyche refused to play along. The idea of my breakup with Joe was so new. Until the thong, our destinies were intertwined. I moved into his brownstone on New York's Upper West Side, and we immediately became a power couple. He joined me on legal outings and golf trips. I was his +1 on client junkets to Cancun, Puerto Rico, and Aspen. Visions of our future crystallized until it vanished behind a wall of writhing flesh I couldn't unsee. Another wave washed in, foam fizzing as the water receded. I wiggled my toes in the sand, willing myself to feel less abandoned. My mom's absence hit worse at times like these. She'd been gone 14 years, yet each morning I woke hoping her cancer had been a bad dream. Mom, I need you today. I don't know how I will manage to be there for Rebecca. My eyelids drifted closed to listen for her. Instead, my dad's voice rang through. Suck it up, you're a Washington. Could I do it? Stand on the altar on my wedding day as maid of honor? There you are, Rebecca said, walking barefoot in the damp sand, her long curly locks and ankle-length maxi dress blew in the salty breeze. I attempted to smile, but tears trailed down my face as they had for hours. Oh, honey, Rebecca's tender expression said it all. She sat to give me a tight arm squeeze, her warmth of surprising welcome. I knew this was a bad idea. Let's skip the ceremony. Oh no, we have all the city work paperwork done. We can lounge in the sun and have a quiet day. My back stiffened. Forget it. Your parents are here, his parents are here, and I bought a Valentino dress straight out of Milan and it will be worn. She eyeballed me for uncertain. Are you sure? Definitely, I said, almost believing it myself. I even skipped my trademark stilettos. Christian Louboutin and Stan don't mix. Rebecca slapped her heart. Yet another sacrifice you've made for me. I'll add that for the tally. Rebecca's expression grew serious. I can't help but feel like this is my fault. I never should have introduced you to Joe. But he was so charming and confident. That he was. My chin sagged to my crossed arms, the ocean swells mirroring my tears. I fell hard and blew by all the red lights, flashing caution. A tsunami rolled in, drenching our clothes and sending us yelping away. Yet another wake-up call that my dream was over. I wanted to believe my friend's earnest prediction. Look at what happened to me. Ethan dumped me and I met Kyle. The same will absolutely happen to you, probably when you least expect it. Promise me I'll meet a good man and everything will be okay? I promise. She pulled me close. You're strong and smart and your future will be magical. Your next Mr. Right could be anywhere, even here on this island. Our attention drifted to a dude sleeping on the lounge chair behind us, his state somewhere between drunk and dead. Our gazes met and Rebecca shrugged. Okay, maybe not right here, right now, but he's here. Besides, you're an amazing woman who can define yourself with or without a man. I linked her arm. Forget my troubles. We're here to celebrate a match that worked, yours. And thanks to me, we both smell like kelp. I'd say some bathing is in order. You sure? Yes. I love you, I do. We stumbled up the beach, chatting while our wet gowns tangled between our legs, launching us into a fit of giggles. She headed back to her cabana and I struggled in the sand along towards mine. Rebecca was right. My future was bright and I was determined to begin living again. While I fought with my nightgown, a shirtless guy jogged by, with suntan skin, brown curly hair, and a sexy-as-hell snake tattoo circling his torso. He was a bad boy who looked deliciously good. He shot me a smile as he passed, our eyes connecting for the briefest of moments. Once lost, his absence hurt. I whipped my body around to watch his retreating form jog down the beach. My lord, that man is gorgeous, I said to no one. But he must have heard me because he began jogging backwards with a wide grin. Ah, crap. Back at you, lovely. I turned to hide my heated face, but my ankles tangled in my dress and I toppled over on the beach like a mermaid caught in a net. Oof! I grunted. My shoulder took the brunt, but I got a mouthful of sand and the ground-up shells sticking to my tongue. I spit them out and wiggled an arm free to wipe away the rest. You okay? My Adonis yelled. Mortified was more like it. Still gathering breath and detangling from my twisted dress, I didn't answer. He drew closer, kneeling by my side, where his manly scent only made matters worse. "Are you hurt?" he asked. "Only my pride," I admitted, wiping my face clear of sand as best I could. Damn, he was even more gorgeous up front. Hazel eyes and lean, powerfully solid muscles that flexed as he squatted. Snowy skin peeked out from where his shorts slipped at his waist. Not that I was staring. "Here!" He extended his hand, helped me up, and we both rose to our... I'm tall at 5'10", and he was even taller. I wobbled, dizzy, but he caught me. "You okay?" he asked, studying me. Having a man concerned for me for the first was a welcome change, and I was ashamed to admit how much I'd missed it. I did my best to recover, standing up tall. "You know, you're a menace," I said. His eyebrows shut up. "Me? I never... You can't parade around with that gorgeous body and expect women not to fall over. Christ, that tattoo is alone is knee melting." I busied myself with wiping sand off my arms while he burst into a delicious rolling laugh. "Are you always this direct?" "Yes, it's one of my most redeeming qualities." He smiled at that. "What's your name?" "Barbara." So, that's a good chunk of chapter 1, but I'll stop there. You can pop over to my website, and if you have questions and you want to email me, I'm happy to listen to any of them. Sometimes people ask me, like, what is your favorite book? But like, I don't have a favorite book. You know, it's like there's so many different stories, but what I love is when I sit down in a book and it just claims me, and it just makes me abandon my laundry and my shopping and everything else until the book is done. Like, I love that experience of reading and books. So I think that's an inspiration for me to try to replicate that experience for readers so that they just keep turning pages. And I feel like my background in marketing and writing marketing copy, you know, is a little bit of an advantage in this sense because, you know, I try to do shorter chapters so people can kind of digest it and feel like, oh, I can do one more, you know. Or you have a little bit like of a question or a little hiccup at the end of the chapter, and then people want to know what happened. They're like, okay, I'm just gonna turn the page. So I hear that people read my books very quickly, which is great, you know, they finish that. So I think that that's the biggest inspiration for me, is just to create really enjoyable experiences. Because if you think about books and story, and you know, we really read for entertainment and to, you know, to learn and to grow and to just go places maybe that are different than our own lives, no matter what our circumstances are. So, you know, my life is so much crazier, different than it was when I grew up living, like sharing a mattress with a sibling head to toe in very impoverished circumstances. So I feel really blessed I made it through. So it's kind of interesting to kind of take those experiences on the pages of a book. The reason why we organized this anthology was because there are a lot of anthologies out there, but they're usually around other genres. They're horror, they're sci-fi, they're fantasy, they're other types of genres, and there aren't a lot of women's fiction anthologies out there. So we thought, you know, we needed to make one if we wanted one. I think a lot of people who write women's fiction write about family dynamics and story, and so I think Motherhood, you know, plays into that, and it actually gave us a really rich tapestry of stories. So my story was contemporary with an older person. There was a story about, you know, a wedding without, you know, a parent had passed and that you're getting their absence. There's another story that was about a World War II German pilot who was also a mother, you know, and she was, you know, captured, and it was just, so like, you know, it's like this huge spectrum of story of motherhood and the circumstances of motherhood and the challenges of motherhood. I think it's it ended up being a way deeper and broader entree into an anthology, because it gave each of the authors a chance to kind of speak their own story in relation to motherhood, and became out dramatically different. But yeah, so I feel like that's what a lot of my stories are about. They're about these little picadillos that, you know, we all experience every day. You know, we all have family members that disappoint us, you know, that don't live up to their potential, whether that's a parent or a grandparent, a sibling, or so forth. And then they have a birthday. And we have to go to the card aisle and sift through cards that don't represent the dynamics of your relationship. Like, I have a very complicated relationship with my mother, who was not around a lot. And, you know, going to get a Mother's Day card, it's just hard, you know. So it's just one of those truths that we all experience that are very relatable. So I feel like those are types of stories that I like to explore because they're really real. You know, there's great moments, there's funny moments, and then there's sad moments, and there's poignant moments. So this kind of gets, people talk about my books a little bit like, you know, you get this little roller coaster of emotion because I like to explore the full range of the human experience. And I think that's why I also include intimacy in my books, because I feel like relationships and intimacy are just central to who we are as humans, and I find it hard to write a story about a relationship, like a loving relationship, a romantic relationship, and not have intimacy in there, because it feels like that's such a powerful bonding experience. So that's in for me. That's a little unusual for women's fiction to have open door intimacy. Usually it's closed door, it's not there at all. Don't even get me started on that, that's a whole nother talk. But yeah, so that's it. I feel like you can skip those pages if you don't want some of the spicy stuff. So, great.
Thank you.
So that's my talk.